Hello and welcome to Analysis with me, Jonathan Steele. The news that a British doctor, Abbas Khan, has died in a Syrian jail just a week before the promised date of his release has sent shockwaves around the world. The London-born surgeon was arrested by Syrian forces last November while treating civilians in war-torn Aleppo. Whilst imprisoned, Dr. Khan claimed he was tortured, beaten and forced to abuse other prisoners. Earlier this month, his mother travelled to Damascus and visited him in a Syrian prison. She found he had lost more than half his body weight and was barely able to walk. Syrian officials have claimed that his death was suicide, caused by his hanging from his own pajamas, whilst the UK Foreign Office Minister Hugh Robertson has called his death in effect murder, and as he put it, at best extremely suspicious. George Galloway, MP, who had been negotiating with the Syrian authorities to go to Damascus and bring Dr. Khan back to Britain, said he believed somebody within the regime had killed Dr. Khan to defy President Assad's decision to release him. So was Dr. Khan's terrible death a politically motivated murder? And what does this case show about brutality within the Syrian regime? Here to discuss this in the studio is Abdulaziz Al-Mashi, Head of Media Communications at the UK Syrian Community, Bill Bowring, Professor of Law at Birkbeck University, and Mohammed Moghrabi, Media Officer at the Syrian British Medical Society. And joining us on the phone from the UAE is Mohammed Abu Asaka, spokesperson for the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees. Welcome to the programme. Let me come to you first of all, Dr. Moghrabi. I mean, there's no doubt in your mind that this was murder, is that right?
Well, let me first pay my utmost tribute, and in behalf of the Syrian British Medical Society and behalf of the British Islamic Medical Association, that's Mr. Doctor Abbas. He was such an honest guy that he actually left his comfortable life. He left his wife and two children to follow his moral obligation to go and help vulnerable, injured people in Syria. And he was quite unfortunate that he being captured only 2 days after his arrival. He took with him quite a lot of medical equipment, was almost like £20,000 from his own pocket. And he delivered all of this as a charity to the field hospitals. And he was also helping out in the theatre, helping and operating on some of the injured people.
But I gather he made more than one visit. This was not his first.
He made more than one visit, correct, yes. And he was insist actually to go back and help every time. And unfortunately, as you introduced already, he has been detained for over a year. And only in the last week or two, his mother was under the impression that he's going to be released, and he transferred that information to him. And he was so happy that he said, finally, I'm going to spend Christmas with my family back in London. So I don't believe at all, or it's hard to believe for any common sense, that this doctor will be committed suicide. It's somebody that is almost going to meet his family. How come there something unbelievable, that sort of statement come out from the Syrian authority? In fact, I could really point out another point in here. Saying that he has committed suicide is another insult to his pure soul. That, as you know, for somebody with a high moral, high ability to help people and to go and risk himself and live his comfortable life in here, then the saying he's committed suicide, this is a sin on Islam. And I don't believe that anybody with a high moral like him, he will be even think about it. So this is unfortunately, on top of his murder, I think they even insult his soul as well.
Well, do you think it's likely that the government will now release his body to the family, as the brother and the family is demanding?
Yes, I wish they will do, because what's the point of retaining his body? I understood that they already done some autopsy process in Syria, but I can reassure you that everything in Syria is fabricated. I don't believe in any autopsy or any result that the Syrian authority will come up with it. The real maybe investigation maybe will start here in London once the body has been released. And we're just hoping that they will release the body as soon as possible.
And what do you think of George Galloway's suggestion that this was done to defy President Assad, or without Assad's knowledge, by somebody in the intelligence services perhaps?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that try to defend Assad. Assad has committed so much war crime in Syria. He murdered so many doctors in Syria. Even anybody who's been transferring any medical equipment and has been caught by his military personnel, they will kill him instantly on scene. So there is a lot of atrocity going on by Assad regime. How come they try actually to denounce that Assad has been maybe implicated on his death? I don't actually want to understand that somebody is already accused by a lot of war crime, all being published even recently by the UN. And they said clearly that a lot of atrocity, a lot of brutality has been committed by the Assad regime, and everybody in the high rank, including himself, has been involved in ordering and implementing that through his regime. So well, I don't believe that statement at all.
Well, what do you think, Bill? I mean, it is embarrassing for President Assad. If he'd ordered the man to be released and the family had been told, then he suddenly apparently is murdered. It is embarrassing to the president, isn't it?
This is all speculation, isn't it?
It's everything speculation.
And we really don't know the facts. I think the speculation that George Galloway has come up with is plausible in a way. It's one of the possibilities. This does seem to be the worst possible thing from the regime's point of view. I mean, it's really very hard to believe that this is what they would actually want to present to the world, particularly when the mother and a British MP are on their way there.
But what about the British Foreign Office? The family, brother of Dr. Abbas, has criticised or even accused the British government of not doing enough, or even not doing anything to help get him released in the first place.
Well, there's a very nasty civil war going on there, and the British really have no levers, I would say. As a matter of fact, with the regime or with anybody very much in Syria at the present time. I would hope that attempts were made through channels that might be available through countries that do have representation to do what they could. But in the context of the civil war, I think it's extremely difficult.
Well, Dr. Moghrabi, I mean, are there quite a lot of foreign doctors working in Syria at the moment? I mean, obviously he was working in the opposition side of the civil war. Are there many doctors like that working there?
Yeah, I speculate there is only a handful of doctors working as a non-Syrian. But I can reassure you the majority of these doctors working inside Syria are Syrian. But we welcome any type of help because, as you may recall, that for example, the area where he captured from, it was maybe in the north. That part of the country has got 5,000 doctors registered on the medical committee. Most of them flee away from the country because it has been a target for Assad to targeting most of those doctors and force them to flee. So from 5,000 doctors, there's only 35 doctors left behind to serve a population area of about 5 million. Could you believe 35 doctors serving 5 million? So that's severe shortage of doctors has triggered an alarming bell for any other doctors from outside the Syrian nationality to come forward and help. And I can say there's a good response, possibly from non-Syrian doctors to actually give a hand and help on that situation.
Well, Dr. Al-Mashi, Mr. Al-Mashi, I think you're not a doctor. Do you think this terrible event is going to deter volunteers going into Syria to help, civilian volunteers, I mean?
Well, I think Dr. Abbas Khan, he was abandoned by his own government, by the British government. And when other doctors look at what happened to Dr. Khan and the way he was abandoned, I think they would hesitate to go and provide humanitarian aid to the Syrian people. I mean, the British government, they're supposed to take steps towards release Mr. Dr. Khan. At least they could put pressure on the Russian government, who are a strong allies to Assad, who can force Assad to release him. I think other doctors, they wouldn't even think to go to Syria and help in these circumstances. But I need to highlight something. You called the situation in Syria is a civil war. Actually, it is not a civil war. It is a revolution. People, the Syrian people, went down to the street against dictatorship. It is not a civil war at all.
Well, it began as
that was my phrase.
I think you used the phrase civil war. It began as a revolution, but it is now a civil war in the sense it's certainly a war, isn't it? And it is between Syrians, so isn't that what's called a civil war?
My definition to a civil war, it is like a sect against sect or a group from definite background against other group. But what's going on in Syria, it is people from all the sectarian sects against the regime. I mean, you can see Christians, Muslims, even some Alawites are against the brutal Syrian regime. So it is not a civil war at all. It is a revolution.
Okay, thank you. Let me come on to Mr. Asaka from the UNHCR. I mean, your organization works also in the medical field, doesn't it? I mean, how bad do you see the situation from just on the medical side?
Well, the situation is increasing rapidly. Last year, we had 410,000 refugees registered with the UNHCR. This year, we have 2.3 million registered with the UNHCR. The actual number is much higher than this. So this is a very big burden in the local communities as well, especially the medical aspect, where the hospitals are packed with Syrian refugees. Every day we receive refugees who are injured from the war, and we transfer them to hospitals for medical care. 2 months ago, we received like 1,300 children were injured in Zaatari camp itself. So the medical aspect is a huge, in kind of like surgical aspect and as well as psychosocial aspect.
Okay, I think the line is not very good. I think we'll have to try and improve the line. It's quite difficult to hear, unfortunately. Let me come back to you, Dr. Mugabe. I mean, has there been any increase in medical aid going in the last few months? I mean, everybody's saying winter is coming. It's now come, and the snow, and we see that on the TV screens and so on. I mean, is any increase in medical aid really coming through?
Well, it's a catastrophic situation now going in Syria, that everything has been exposed so badly to the inside Syria and outside as well, in the refugee camps. There's shortage in everything. Even now, unfortunately, with the snowstorm going on, people has been really, whatever precaution they have been trying to achieve beforehand was a shortage of everything, shortage and supply of maybe tents, blankets, or even food, or even medical supply. That shortage has become even more severe. And I can tell you as well, on the last few weeks, there was a lot of escalation brutality by the Syrian regime, especially on the northern part of Syria and Aleppo. We have seen on the last few days quite a lot of atrocity going on. There's a barrel bombs, 100, not 100, it's about tens, or maybe I heard about at least 25 barrel bomb has been dropped in the civilian area in the middle of a city inhabiting 3 million people there. And there's a lot of, life loss, a lot of injured people. The injured estimated at least 1,000 of them. And the local hospital, the field hospital, flooded with injured, and now they are short in everything.
And what do you see as the solution? I mean, what can be done?
Well, the solution is really, surprisingly, that after 2.5 years of continuous atrocity, everybody in the world is just watching. How come on earth we've seen a fighter jet, we've seen a helicopter dropping barrel bombs of 400 kilograms each one, has got full of TNT explosive, full of nails and sharpeners and everything on the civilian area, and nobody do something about it?
No,
and even
what can be done? I mean,
well,
I think it's clear that terrible things are happening. How is it going to be stopped?
Well, I'm not a politician, but I can tell you the Free Syrian Army has been demanded so many times beforehand that they need ammunition, they need strategic weapons to defend themselves. They can actually achieve a no-fly zone by having the maybe advanced handheld rockets that they can bar any sort of helicopters or fighter jets from coming over and drop these bombs. As a death going everywhere, that's because there is a shortage in all the defending equipment that it can be easily maybe being delivered to the Syrian army to defend themselves.
Well, Bill, I mean, what's your view? I mean, international intervention, unless there's a Security Council resolution, would be illegal, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, and I think it's clear and has been clear for a while now that there cannot be legal intervention. In fact, there is daily intervention by a number of powers, including Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and others. In fact, on a very large scale, and of course Russia is very heavily involved on the side of the regime. From an international legal point of view, this should be something that the Syrian people sort out for themselves. I think the expectation was that Assad would fall rapidly 2.5 years ago, and that simply hasn't happened. He is still there, and both sides hold territory, and as we know for sure in the last few days, the opposition to Assad is divided.
Now, when the UK government, to come back to the Dr. Abbas's case, describes what has happened as in effect murder.
It sounds like it. Yes, it does indeed sound like murder.
But when a government accuses another government of murder, isn't that an invitation to International Criminal Court or something to take action?
Well, this is certainly governed by the protocols to the Geneva Convention. It's an internal armed conflict, and I think we can be sure that war crimes have been committed, probably on both sides, but certainly by the regime, of that there's no doubt. The question is how you bring people to justice. That is another question. And while the conflict is going on, that is really quite exceptionally difficult.
What's your argument? Do you think that there should be an International Criminal Court involved?
Well, that's not only should be, it must. In my opinion, will be no justice at all in that war that we're living through if there is no International Criminal Court to investigate what has been going on for 2.5, 3 years so far.
But on both sides, on the rebel side as well as on the government side?
Well, I don't believe that the atrocity majority has been committed by the government sides. And when the international community try to focus on both sides...
If you want an inquiry, surely you have to expect it to work on both sides.
Well, I do believe, actually, that atrocity has to be finished off, wherever it's come from. But I can tell you, reassure you, when we're talking about shortfall of Assad has been expected by the external power, I can tell you that the Assad could have been fall a long time ago, but now what's going on is like external invasion by the Shiite from Iraq. There is a revolution guard from Iran is actually operating freely inside Syria. Hezbollah has got thousands and thousands of militants, has been fighting with Assad all the time. And without those support, this is like a foreign invasion to Syria. Assad is not anymore, it's just only simple for all of these occupation forces came from all over the areas to defend the brutality in Syria.
No, but also forces came from all over the area, including Al-Qaeda, to try and get rid of Assad.
Well, when we compare the both sides, I think there's a lot of magnification going on the Al-Qaeda side when there are maybe numbers and maybe 100 or less than 1,000 compare with another army. What happened on the regime side, he's got something like at least 50 or 60,000 people supporting him.
You mentioned the Free Syrian Army.
Nobody has mentioned anything about the foreign occupation come to help.
But you mentioned the Free Syrian Army before. The other day, the general, Salam Idris, the head of the Free Syrian Army, was forced to flee into Turkey because of jihadi forces that were taking over his headquarters.
Well, he came out and he said that's not true. He said himself, I didn't flee. I was just coming back to Turkey to delegate with my colleagues. So that's not actually correct what is being maybe broadcast.
What's happened to his arms and his supplies and his headquarters?
And I do believe there is always in any of this chaotic situation, there will be some misunderstanding, some clashes. But I can reassure you that I have the information that whatever has been taken away from the storage area for Free Syrian Army has been already returned back to their own basement and own position. So this is sort of maybe some of misunderstanding and clashes between some of the forces, but in reality, majority of the forces on the ground are fighting Assad. And that's the main thing we need to focus on.
But the British government and the American government stopped their aid to the Free Syrian Army because of these clashes.
Exactly that at the beginning of the reaction. But then I believe the foreign minister of Mr. Kerry came out and he said clearly himself that we are going to resume the help to the Syrian opposition forces. So they haven't actually denounced that completely. And I do believe that this is not the right option to do anyway. I think the main thing, if we need to stop this ongoing atrocity, we need to look who's committing the most of the war crime in the area, who has been killing his own people for 2.5 years and more, and who has already gassed his own people to kill 1,429 innocent civilian, majority of them children, who actually already killed 150,000 people on the street, and there's maybe double of that number already missing on the detention centers. And in addition to, everybody knows there is about 4 million at least of refugees are scattered outside the country, and there's at least another 5-6 million internally displaced. So the scale of the atrocity is unbelievable, and they cannot really keep it going forever. The international communities has got a moral obligation to stop the cause of that, and the main cause of that is Assad regime. It's a dictatorship that has been killing his own people for a long time. Enough is enough. Okay.
Well, Bill Baring, I mean, morality and law are often not quite the same thing. I mean, there is the issue, the legal issue, as we mentioned before, is if there's no Security Council intervention resolution, it is illegal, even if it's moral to try and
Yes,
intervene.
and on the point my colleague was just making, I really highly recommend the article in the latest London Review of Books by Seymour M. Hersh, the very well-known investigative journalist, entitled Who's Sarin?, in which he gives a great deal of detail as to why it was not actually necessarily Assad who used the poison gas. And the fact that that was actually much more complicated and there were more possibilities than at first appeared was one of the reasons that the United States pulled back, actually. And he gives chapter and verse over about 6 pages. And I really recommend that, not least because it shows how incredibly complicated and chaotic the situation is.
Well, you would dispute that probably. I mean, you're certain that the sarin gas was used by the Assad government forces.
Well, I think that all the report has been published, documented that maybe the means of using this type of chemical weapons, they need a special artillery machine ejectory, and there is special equipment that does not exist at all in the hands of the opposition. And not only that, I think the report from the American government, it came out to say, and not only the American, the British as well, they say it's most likely it's actually done by the regime because there is no such a capability in the hands of the opposition.
Okay, well, we can move on to some of the other issues after the break. Stay with us and we'll be discussing the humanitarian crisis particularly, but also the options for the peace conference in Geneva next month. Stay with us.